People always say never burn bridges, but they forget to mention taking the only key. 3 days before Christmas, a CEO in a $3,000 suit fired me to trim his budget. I did not argue. I just flew to Hawaii. He had no idea. The code keeping our 500 delivery robots alive in the snowstorm was tethered to my heartbeat. Since I was on vacation, the robots took one too. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Boss Revenge Stories. We want to sincerely thank you for your incredible support over the years. But unfortunately, YouTube has completely disabled our monetization features, leaving us without the necessary budget to keep the channel operating. Because of this, we will not be uploading any new videos here for the foreseeable future, and we are officially transitioning our operations over to Patreon. If you find today's story entertaining, please consider supporting us by joining our Patreon community, where you will get access to exclusive, true stories that are significantly longer, incredibly detailed, and feature multiple emotional voice actors, bringing situations to life that we simply cannot make public on YouTube. You can join us right now by scanning the Patreon QR code displayed on your screen, or by clicking the link provided in the video description or the pinned comment below. Now, let us dive right into today's story, where Kendall Williams, learned exactly how much a corporate ego can cost when you mess with the wrong engineer. I am 34 years old, and until the 22nd of December, I was the Chief Autonomous Systems Architect at Omnitrek Logistics, located in Denver, Colorado. My office was not just a typical corporate workspace. It was the highly sophisticated nerve center for a massive fleet of next-generation delivery machines. The morning everything changed, I was standing at my command console, intensely tracking the barometric pressure of a historic blizzard that the National Weather Service promised would bury the entire city under several feet of snow by midnight. The radar screen in front of me was a swirling, aggressive mass of dark red and purple pixels. We had exactly 500 heavy-duty delivery robots scheduled to hit the icy pavement to handle the massive, chaotic holiday shipping surge. Each one of these autonomous machines weighed nearly 400 pounds and carried up to $2,000 worth of consumer electronics, fragile holiday gifts, and vital prescription medications. Right in the middle of manually calculating the thermal drain on the lithium battery grids, I got an urgent ping from Executive Human Resources. I was summoned immediately to the main glass conference room on the top floor of the building. When I walked through those heavy glass doors, Marcus Thorne was waiting for me. Marcus was our newly appointed Chief Executive Officer. He was the quintessential tech bro, a former venture capitalist who wore $3,000 tailored wool vests and truly believed that complex software was just a commodity you could buy, own outright, and never have to actually understand. He had the kind of aggressive, blindingly white smile that only comes from deep corporate ruthlessness and very expensive dental veneers. He looked at our intricate engineering department and saw nothing but a spreadsheet full of numbers that needed to be erased. He did not even offer me a seat before he slid a crisp, single-page severance agreement directly across the polished mahogany table. "Kendall, we are doing some aggressive corporate restructuring," Marcus said, his tone dripping with the kind of fake, rehearsed empathy they teach in weekend business seminars. "The board of directors feels that our self-learning AI systems are smart enough now to run on autopilot. Frankly, keeping a chief engineer on the payroll with your exorbitant salary just does not make financial sense for us anymore. We are trimming the fat to make the end-of-the-year financial reports look attractive for the shareholders." I looked down at the legally binding piece of paper and then looked right back up at his smug face. I did not cry. I did not raise my voice or show a single ounce of panic. I was a structural engineer of autonomous logistics, and my brain immediately switched into a cold, calculating risk assessment mode. "Marcus, before we finalize any of this, I need to remind you about the winter protocol," I said, keeping my voice completely level and devoid of emotion. "The core AI does not know how to handle sudden sub-zero terrain shifts or black ice. The Winter Protocol is a proprietary safety algorithm I personally wrote and patented on my own time. I granted Omnitrek a temporary, exclusive license to use it, so our outdoor delivery fleet does not turn into highly destructive, out-of-control battering rams during severe weather events, like the historic blizzard hitting us in exactly 14 hours. Marcus leaned back in his plush leather executive chair, steepling his fingers together. He let out a condescending chuckle that echoed loudly off the soundproof glass walls. "I have been doing this a long time, Kendall," he said, shaking his head with a patronizing smirk. "I know exactly how this game goes. You are upset you are losing your high-paying job right before the holidays. So you invent some apocalyptic technical threat to make yourself seem entirely indispensable. It is a desperate bluff. My IT department is full of incredibly expensive tech graduates. If there is some magical piece of code you locked, they will just crack it and bypass it by lunchtime." He really thought he was being a ruthless, visionary leader. He thought he was expertly calling my bluff. He had absolutely no idea that advanced software architecture is not just a cheap padlock you can pick with brute force. It is a living, breathing digital ecosystem. And I was the only oxygen source. I did not argue with him any further. Arguing with a man like Marcus is like trying to explain advanced calculus to a pigeon. It just wastes your time and annoys the bird. Instead, I picked up the severance agreement and read the fine print at the bottom of the page. "Fine," I replied simply, dropping the paper back onto the desk. "But I need to know the exact timeline of this termination. What time precisely? Is my system access completely revoked?" Marcus casually checked his heavy gold watch. "Your administrative credentials will be permanently deactivated at exactly 5 o'clock this afternoon. You will have until then to clear out your desk and surrender your keycard." I nodded slowly and pulled a pen from my pocket, but I did not sign the document just yet. If I am officially out at exactly 5 o'clock, then I want it added to this legal document right now, in writing, that I hold absolutely zero legal, financial, or operational liability for anything that happens to the Omnitrek delivery fleet from 5 o'clock onwards. If I am no longer your employee, I am no longer your insurance policy. Marcus practically beamed with overwhelming arrogance. He quickly grabbed his own expensive fountain pen and scribbled a messy, handwritten addendum at the bottom of the page, signing his name with a dramatic flourish. He slid it back across the table to me. He was so incredibly proud of himself. In his narrow mind, he had just scored a massive victory for the board. He thought he was brilliantly saving $2 million in end-of-the-year technical department bonuses just in time for his final fiscal quarter review. I had no earthly clue that by forcing me out and willingly signing away my liability, he had just single-handedly signed a total death warrant for the absolute biggest, most profitable business season of the entire year. I signed my name on the dotted line, perfectly matching his cold, purely transactional energy. "Happy holidays, Marcus," I said smoothly. I turned around and walked straight out of the glass room, leaving him smiling proudly in his $3,000 vest, completely oblivious to the massive avalanche he had just triggered. I walked back to my desk in the main engineering bullpen. The news of my sudden termination had already spread through the company internal messaging system like a terrible digital virus. Several junior developers looked up from their dual monitors, their faces tight with pity, shock, and confusion. A few of them even tried to stand up and walk over to offer their condolences or ask what had just happened upstairs, but I simply held up my hand to stop them in their tracks. I did not want their comfort, and I definitely did not want their pity. I packed my belongings in total, methodical silence. I carefully placed my personalized mechanical keyboard, my framed engineering degrees, and a few small desk plants into a standard brown cardboard box. When the senior project manager nervously approached and tried to offer a sympathetic apology on behalf of the team, I just gave him a small, polite half-smile and kept walking straight toward the exit. The air in that room felt incredibly heavy and suffocating, but internally, my mind was perfectly clear and terrifyingly calm. I pushed through the heavy revolving glass doors and stepped out into the freezing Denver air. The wind was already picking up rapidly, carrying the bitter, sharp sting of the approaching historic storm. I had barely reached my car in the sprawling employee parking structure when I heard heavy footsteps crunching quickly on the cold concrete right behind me. It was Elias Vance, our dedicated field technical captain. He was completely out of breath, tightly clutching his primary diagnostic tablet against his heavy winter coat. Elias was a brilliant and intuitive mechanic, the exact kind of guy who knew the physical hardware of our machines better than anyone else in the entire state. "Kendall, wait," Elias called out, his warm breath pluming thickly in the freezing air. He immediately shoved the glowing tablet toward me. "What in the world is going on with the primary servers?" "The exact moment human resources locked your administrative account. The fleet status indicators started flashing a solid warning yellow across the entire city grid. I have never seen this sequence before." I looked down at the bright screen, recognizing the subtle, deliberate shift in the system architecture immediately. The core safety mechanisms were already beginning their automated countdown. I reached out and firmly patted Elias on the shoulder, looking him dead in the eye to ensure he grasped the gravity of the situation. "Listen to me very carefully, Elias," I said, making sure my voice cut cleanly through the howling wind. "Under absolutely no circumstances are you to accept any executive orders to manually intervene with the motherboards on those robots for the next 72 hours. Do you understand me? If the new boss orders you to physically crack open those heavy metal chassis to bypass the software, you must refuse. Do it unless you want to risk a lethal electrocution from the high-voltage thermal defense systems, or much worse, take on the total legal liability for destroying millions of dollars in company hardware." Elias swallowed hard, his eyes growing wide with sudden realization, and he gave me a very slow, serious nod. He knew better than to ever question my technical warnings. I loaded my cardboard box into the trunk of my car and drove away from the Omnitrek campus without looking back in the rearview mirror even once. I did not drive back to my lonely apartment to aggressively update my resume or panic about my future. Instead, I merged directly onto the icy highway and headed straight for Denver International Airport. I already had a digital boarding pass saved on my phone for a one-way, first-class ticket to Maui, Hawaii. It was a beautiful tropical winter vacation I had meticulously planned and fully paid for over 2 years ago, but I had constantly been forced to postpone it because the company always claimed they desperately needed me for one weekend emergency or another. Well, they officially no longer needed me, and the warm, sandy beaches were finally calling my name. I breezed through airport security and settled into the plush seating of the airline lounge, calmly sipping a warm green tea while watching the heavy, ominous gray clouds gather outside the massive terminal windows. I boarded the plane just as the first heavy, aggressive snowflakes began to violently strike the tarmac. I settled into my incredibly spacious leather seat and glanced at the digital face of my smartwatch. It was exactly 4:59 in the afternoon. I watched the digital seconds tick away. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, exactly at 5 o'clock. The heavy cabin doors were sealed shut, and the massive aircraft began its long taxi down the runway. As my phone entirely lost its connection to the local ground network and switched over to the limited satellite connection, the Omnitrek main servers back in the freezing city registered a critical environmental change. The advanced system detected that the authorized host server had officially left the designated geographical boundaries. You see, the Winter Protocol was not just a static, easily replicable piece of code sitting on a dusty hard drive somewhere in the corporate basement. It was a highly dynamic, living biometric tether. When I designed the safety system, I knew the absolute biggest threat to 500 autonomous robots roaming the dark streets during a chaotic storm was not just the snow. It was malicious hackers trying to hijack the fleet to steal thousands of dollars in merchandise. To prevent this, the protocol required a deeply encrypted ping from my personal device, synchronized perfectly with my own biological heart rate, every 12 hours. It was a digital heartbeat that told the complex machines their guardian was present and the network was completely secure, without me inside the authorized zone to provide that cryptographic oxygen. The entire fleet would logically assume they were under a sophisticated cyber attack. If they did not receive my unique signal, they would not just break down or crash. They would automatically seal themselves shut and enter an impenetrable, highly defensive protection mode. as the jet engines roared to life and the plane ripped through the freezing clouds, heading for the warm Pacific Ocean. I leaned back and closed my eyes. The storm was finally here. By the time the sun tried and completely failed to rise on the morning of December 23rd, the city of Denver was entirely buried under a relentless, suffocating blanket of white. The historic blizzard had delivered on every single meteorological promise, transforming the bustling metropolitan grid into a frozen, impassable wasteland. Inside the heavily heated Omnitrek Logistics headquarters, the holiday panic was reaching an absolute boiling point. The delivery queue was overflowing with tens of thousands of premium expedited packages. In a desperate bid to clear the massive backlog and prove his aggressive restructuring was a triumphant success, Marcus authorized the immediate deployment of the entire active fleet. Nearly 500 heavy-duty, autonomous delivery machines rolled out of the massive subterranean loading bays, their thick all-terrain treads crunching violently against the mounting snow. They were dispersed across every single zip code in the greater metropolitan area, navigating the treacherous, icy roads to deliver everything from expensive gaming consoles to urgent prescription medications. For a brief, shining moment, Marcus felt like an absolute genius. And then, exactly at 8 o'clock in the morning, the 12-hour biometric safety window officially expired. The synchronized event was a masterpiece of automated precision. It did not matter if a robot was rolling right down the center of a busy intersection, crawling up a steep suburban driveway, or navigating a narrow pedestrian crosswalk. The second the internal clock struck 8, all 500 machines stopped dead in their tracks simultaneously. The heavy mechanical treads locked into place with a resounding, heavy metallic thud. The sophisticated sensory antennas, which usually spun frantically to map the surrounding environment, retracted smoothly into the armored chassis like frightened turtles pulling their heads into their shells. The titanium cargo bays slammed shut, engaging the secondary deadbolts with a sharp, audible click. Finally, a ring of bright amber hazard lights illuminated around the perimeter of each robot, pulsing rhythmically through the blinding white snowstorm to warn oncoming traffic that the machines were officially out of commission. Back inside the central command center, the massive panoramic monitors that covered the entire front wall instantly shifted from a healthy operational green to a stark, icy blue. All the complex telemetry data, the routing maps, and the battery indicators vanished completely. In their place, a single line of crisp white text appeared across every single screen in the building. Guarantor signal lost. Safe hibernation mode activated. Happy holidays. Marcus spilled his piping hot espresso down the front of his $3,000 tailored wool vest as he sprinted into the control room. His face was entirely devoid of color, replaced by an expression of pure, unadulterated panic. He grabbed the nearest junior IT developer by the shoulders and aggressively shoved him toward a vacant terminal. "Fix this right now!" Marcus screamed, his voice cracking loudly in the otherwise silent room. Hack into the mainframe, bypass the biometric locks. Do whatever you have to do to reboot those machines. We have thousands of angry customers waiting for their packages. The terrified young developer immediately began frantically typing, trying to force an emergency override through the central administrative portal. But he quickly discovered what I already knew. You cannot simply bully a masterfully crafted security algorithm into submission. Every single time the IT team attempted a brute force entry, the system recognized it as a hostile cyber attack. For every line of code they tried to alter, my proprietary software automatically deployed a fresh, highly complex layer of military-grade encryption over the core matrix. It was the digital equivalent of a Chinese finger trap. The harder they struggled and fought against it, the tighter the security protocols squeezed the system shut. By 8:30 in the morning, the terrified IT department had accidentally locked themselves out of the secondary diagnostic servers entirely. Out on the freezing streets, the situation was rapidly deteriorating from a minor logistical embarrassment into a full-blown civic emergency. 500 stationary, 400-pound titanium obstacles were now permanently parked in the middle of heavily congested roadways. Commuters trying to navigate the dangerous snowstorm were forced to violently swerve around the dead robots, causing dozens of minor traffic collisions. City snowplows could not clear the primary arteries because the massive machines were blocking the critical intersections. At exactly 9:15 in the morning, the red emergency phone on the wall of the command center began to ring. It was the Denver chief of police. He was absolutely furious, screaming at Marcus through the receiver that 3 different emergency response vehicles, including an ambulance carrying a critical patient, were entirely trapped on a major avenue because 6 Omnitrek delivery robots had initiated their hibernation mode right in the middle of the road. The chief bluntly informed Marcus that if the fleet was not moved within the hour, the city would personally fine the corporation millions of dollars for reckless endangerment and the deliberate obstruction of emergency services, and they would send heavy tow trucks to physically destroy the machines if necessary. While Marcus was pacing frantically back and forth across the glass conference room, sweating profusely and clutching his chest as his entire corporate empire aggressively melted down in the sub-zero temperatures, I was experiencing a very different kind of morning. I was lying comfortably on a plush, white lounge chair on the incredibly sunny shores of Maui. The sky above me was a brilliant, flawless shade of tropical blue, completely free of any dark, ominous clouds. A gentle, warm ocean breeze rustled the bright green palm leaves above my head. The soothing sound of the crashing Pacific waves perfectly drowned out any lingering thoughts of winter coats or corporate politics. I reached over to the small wooden table next to me and took a long, refreshing sip of a perfectly mixed Mai Tai, letting the sweet flavor of pineapple and dark rum wash over me. I felt the warm Hawaiian sun baking into my skin, melting away years of accumulated office stress. Right on cue, my personal cell phone, which was resting right next to my tropical drink, began to vibrate violently against the wooden tabletop. It buzzed rapidly, aggressively dancing across the surface. I casually picked up and glanced at the bright digital display. The lock screen was completely overflowing with notifications. There were over 40 missed calls, dozens of frantic text messages, and a flood of urgent emails. The caller ID was frantically flashing between Marcus, the general company switchboard, and the human resources department. They were desperate. They were terrified. They finally understood the true value of the person they had so casually discarded just a few hours prior. I stared at the flashing name on the screen for a few very long, satisfying seconds. I did not feel an ounce of guilt. I felt absolute, undeniable vindication. I smiled, a genuine, completely relaxed smile, and smoothly swiped my thumb across the screen, turning on the Do Not Disturb mode. The phone instantly went entirely dark and completely silent. I set it back down on the table, adjusted my dark sunglasses, and leaned back into the comfortable cushions, ready to enjoy the rest of my beautiful, uninterrupted tropical vacation. It was late into the afternoon when the bright tropical sun finally began to dip toward the horizon, casting a warm, golden glow across the calm waters of the Pacific Ocean. I was finishing the very last drop of my second cocktail when my phone suddenly broke its long, peaceful silence, despite the strict Do Not Disturb filter I had set earlier. A call was stubbornly forcing its way through. I glanced at the glowing screen and saw an unfamiliar, unlisted local Hawaiian area code. I knew exactly what that meant. Someone in the executive suite had grown so incredibly desperate that they were bypassing the blocked company directory and using a burner phone, or perhaps a hotel concierge line, just to reach me. I took a slow, deep breath, enjoying the fresh, salty air, and calmly pressed the green accept button. I brought the phone to my ear, but before I could even utter a single greeting, a voice completely exploded through the tiny speaker. "You are going to federal prison. Kendall, do you hear me? I have the Federal Bureau of Investigation on the other line right now, and I am formally charging you with corporate sabotage, grand larceny, and cyberterrorism." It was Marcus. His voice was entirely unrecognizable from the smug, polished executive who had fired me just 24 hours prior. He sounded unhinged, frantic, and completely stripped of his arrogant veneer. I could hear the chaotic, muffled screams of the engineering department in the background, mixed with the shrill ringing of multiple emergency landlines. I did not raise my voice. I did not interrupt his manic tirade. I simply leaned back against the plush cushions of my lounge chair, holding the phone slightly away from my ear until he ran out of breath. When all I could hear was his heavy, ragged panting, I finally spoke. "I did not sabotage anything, Marcus," I replied, my voice completely smooth and dripping with absolute ice. "There is absolutely no malware. There are no hidden viruses. The system is currently operating perfectly, exactly according to the proprietary safety design that I legally patented." "You locked 500 robots in the middle of a blizzard," he shrieked, his voice cracking into a high pitch. "The mayor is threatening to arrest me. Our stock is plummeting in the aftermarket. Unlock the administrative servers right now, or I swear I will destroy your entire life." "I cannot do that, Marcus, because I no longer have the legal authorization to do so," I explained patiently, adopting the exact same condescending tone a teacher might use with a very slow, stubborn child. "Let me explain a basic concept of software engineering and intellectual property law to you. Omnitrek Logistics owns the heavy titanium chassis. The company owns the expensive lithium batteries, the rubber treads, and the standard navigational cameras. But the complex algorithm that keeps those massive machines from crashing into minivans during sub-zero temperatures, the winter protocol, that is entirely my personal intellectual property. I created it on my own time, and I legally own the exclusive copyright." I paused for a moment, letting the heavy weight of my words sink through the phone line. The background noise in his office seemed to suddenly grow completely quiet. "When I was an active employee, I graciously granted the company a temporary free license to utilize my software," I continued, making sure my articulation was razor sharp. "But yesterday afternoon, you explicitly terminated my employment. You forcefully revoked my access and demanded I sign a document severing all of my legal and operational liabilities at exactly 5 o'clock. The second that contract went into effect, my software license automatically expired. The robots are not broken, Marcus. They are simply complying with strict federal intellectual property laws. They are protecting themselves, and more importantly, they are protecting my legal copyright." There was a long, agonizing silence on the other end of the line. I could almost hear the rusted gears turning in his head as the devastating reality of his massive blunder finally took hold. He had not just fired an engineer, he had casually evicted the absolute foundation of his entire winter logistics operation. When Marcus spoke again, the aggressive threats were completely gone. His voice was trembling, reduced to a pathetic, desperate beg. "Kendall, please," he stammered, his breathing shallow and rapid. Okay, you made your point. You are brilliant. I made a mistake. I will authorize a direct wire transfer of $100,000 into your personal checking account this very second. Just give us the biometric ping. Give us the encryption key. We have critical deliveries out there. We have severe asthma medications and insulin trapped in those cargo bays. You have a moral responsibility to help these people." I actually laughed out loud. The sound startled a small bird resting on the railing of my balcony. "Do not ever try to weaponize morality against me, Marcus," I fired back without an ounce of mercy. "You did not care about those life-saving medications yesterday when you were eagerly trimming the fat to secure your massive holiday bonus. You did not care about my livelihood when you slid that termination paper across the mahogany table. I am just quoting your exact words here. Marcus, I am just a highly expensive system that needed to be cut. My moral responsibility to Omnitrek and to your logistics network ended at exactly 5 o'clock yesterday afternoon, right alongside my comprehensive health insurance." "You cannot do this," he screamed, his brief moment of fake humility instantly vanishing into blind, terrifying rage. "I am the chief executive officer. I have supreme, unrestricted administrative rights over this entire digital network, and I will tear your stupid protocol out by the roots." Over the phone line, I heard the heavy, frantic clacking of a mechanical keyboard. Marcus was physically shoving a junior developer out of the way and taking control of the main terminal himself. He was panicking, acting on pure, unfiltered adrenaline, and towering hubris. "Marcus, do not touch the root directory," I warned him, my voice turning deadly serious. "You do not understand the underlying architecture. If you try to force a master override without the proper biometric handshake, the system will execute a total fail-safe." "Watch me, you arrogant fool," he yelled triumphantly, followed by the incredibly loud, aggressive sound of his fist violently smashing down on the enter key. He had just executed the absolute worst possible command in the entire network database. He had initiated the wipeout protocol, an extreme, last resort command designed only for scenarios where the hardware fell into enemy hands during a corporate espionage event. Instantly, the phone line filled with the chaotic sounds of absolute technological disaster. Back in Denver, across 500 completely frozen street corners, heavy intersections, and snow-buried sidewalks, the delivery robots reacted to the forced memory wipe, but they did not reboot. Instead, their external speakers, which were typically used to gently announce package arrivals to customers, suddenly cranked to their absolute maximum volume. A tinny, incredibly loud, 8-bit instrumental version of the song. Jingle bells began blasting aggressively into the howling blizzard from 500 different machines simultaneously. But the loud, obnoxious holiday music was only the superficial punishment. The true devastation was happening deep inside the corporate servers. By initiating the wipeout command on a highly restricted, federally copyrighted system, Marcus had inadvertently triggered an automatic, unblockable compliance audit. "What is happening?" Marcus gasped over the phone, his voice dropping to a terrified whisper. "Why is the screen flashing red? What is this automated script?" "You just triggered a catastrophic breach of contract alert, Marcus," I said, a cold smile spreading across my face as I listened to his total destruction. "That automated script you are looking at is currently compiling a comprehensive, completely unredacted digital report. It is documenting your unauthorized attempt to forcefully alter copyrighted safety software, and it is simultaneously emailing that exact report, along with the total estimated financial damages, the police citations, and the footage of the paralyzed fleet, directly to the personal inboxes of every single member of the board of directors." "No," Marcus breathed out, the sound filled with utter hollow despair. "Stop it. Kendall, stop the email." "I cannot," I replied softly. "You are the one who pressed enter. You just officially reported your own gross incompetence to the people who sign your paychecks. Merry Christmas, Marcus." I pulled the phone away from my ear and firmly pressed the red button to end the call. The line went completely dead. I set the device face down on the wooden table, picked up my empty glass, and signaled for the waiter to bring me another drink. Somewhere out there in the freezing cold, 500 heavy metal robots were singing a cheerful holiday tune, and a $3,000 suit was completely unraveling at the seams. By the time the digital clock on the sleek boardroom wall struck exactly 12 midnight, the atmosphere inside the top floor of the Omnitrek headquarters was infinitely colder than the raging blizzard outside. The board of directors had been pulled from their warm beds and summoned to an emergency corporate session. On the massive financial monitor dominating the room, a jagged red line charted the absolute freefall of the company stock in the after-hours trading market. The news of 500 paralyzed robots blocking critical city infrastructure had leaked to the press, and the financial bleeding was completely out of control. Sitting at the far end of the long glass table was Sarah Sterling, the chief legal officer of the corporation. She was a fiercely intelligent, razor-sharp attorney who survived corporate regimes by relying strictly on documented facts rather than inflated egos. She stood up smoothly, projecting a series of highly encrypted digital documents onto the main presentation screen. "Ladies and gentlemen," Sarah began, her voice completely devoid of any sympathy as she looked directly at the panicked face of the chief executive officer, "what we are looking at is not a cyber attack, nor is it a random system failure. It is a direct result of gross executive negligence, specifically, the negligence of Marcus Thorne." Marcus opened his mouth to defend himself, his $3,000 vest now wrinkled and stained with dried coffee. But Sarah immediately silenced him by pulling up a high-resolution scan of the severance agreement he had signed just 1 day prior. At exactly 5 o'clock yesterday afternoon, Sarah continued, meticulously pointing at the handwritten addendum at the bottom of the page. Marcus forcefully terminated Kendall Williams, our chief autonomous systems architect. He did this despite a clear, verbal warning regarding a proprietary piece of safety software known as the Winter Protocol. He went a step further and legally absolved her of all operational liability in writing, because Kendall privately owns the exclusive copyright to that algorithm. Her dismissal triggered an automatic revocation of our corporate license. Furthermore, at approximately 4 o'clock this afternoon, Marcus attempted to violently override this copyright using a restricted administrative command, which initiated the catastrophic compliance audit we all received in our inboxes. An incredibly heavy, suffocating silence fell over the boardroom. The chairman of the board, an older man with a terrifyingly calm demeanor, leaned forward and folded his hands together. "What is our current exposure, Sarah?" the chairman asked quietly. "Give me the exact financial damages." Sarah did not even need to look at her notes. Based on the mandatory refunds for tens of thousands of delayed premium packages, the heavy contractual penalties we owe to our retail partners, and the massive civil fines the city of Denver is currently levying against us for obstructing emergency medical vehicles, we are looking at an immediate financial loss of over $50 million. That number will exponentially increase if those machines are not moved by tomorrow morning. The chairman slowly turned his head to look at Marcus. $50 million, the chairman repeated, letting the massive sum hang in the freezing air. "And remind me, Marcus, exactly how much money were you planning to save the company by firing our chief engineer and bypassing the technical department holiday bonuses?" Marcus was sweating profusely, his hands shaking as he gripped the edge of the glass table. $2 million, he whispered. "So, to save us $2 million, you have cost us 25 times that amount in a single day, while simultaneously destroying our public reputation during the most profitable quarter of the entire year," the chairman stated, his voice as cold as ice. He did not yell. He did not need to. True financial power never raises its voice. "Marcus," the chairman said, delivering the final verdict without a single ounce of hesitation or mercy, "you are hereby terminated as the Chief Executive Officer of Omnitrek Logistics, effectively immediately, for extreme gross negligence. All of your unvested stock options are officially canceled. Furthermore, the board is authorizing Sarah to prepare a massive civil lawsuit against you personally to recoup the damages you have caused this corporation. Security will escort you out of the building now." Too large. Heavily armed corporate security guards stepped smoothly out of the shadows near the boardroom doors. Marcus looked around the table, desperately searching for a single sympathetic face, but he found absolutely nothing except cold, hard stares. He stood up on trembling legs and was physically marched out of the glass room in total, absolute disgrace, stripped of his power, his wealth, and his arrogant pride in less than 5 minutes, once the heavy doors clicked shut behind the ruined man. The chairman let out a long, tired sigh and rubbed his temples. "All right, Sarah," the chairman said, looking back at the brilliant legal officer. "The bleeding has to stop right now. What is our only remaining solution?" Sarah pulled up a global tracking map on her glowing tablet. A single, bright green locator beacon was flashing steadily in the middle of the vast Pacific Ocean. She let out a heavy sigh of her own, fully grasping the sheer magnitude of the absolute defeat they were about to endure. "Prepare a private jet immediately," Sarah ordered, staring intensely at the tiny island on the screen. "I have to fly to Maui, Hawaii. We are going to have to pay a very, very high price to fix this terrible mistake." The next morning was absolutely pristine. The Hawaiian sun was incredibly bright, reflecting off the crystal-clear water of the luxury resort swimming pool. I was wearing a wide-brimmed straw hat, enjoying a fresh plate of tropical fruit, when Sarah Sterling finally made her highly anticipated appearance. She looked entirely out of place walking across the wooden pool deck in a sharp, dark corporate blazer, carrying a massive leather briefcase. She looked thoroughly exhausted from the overnight private flight from the freezing mainland, and for the first time in her illustrious legal career, she approached me with a profoundly humble, almost defeated expression. She pulled up a chair across from my small patio table. "Good morning, Kendall," Sarah said quietly. Skipping all the usual corporate pleasantries, she opened her heavy briefcase and pulled out a thick stack of legal documents. "The board of directors formally apologizes for the incredibly catastrophic error in judgment made by our former chief executive officer. Marcus has been terminated. We want to bring you back. We are prepared to offer you your previous position, a significant salary increase, and a substantial bonus to immediately reactivate the winter protocol." I took a slow bite of fresh pineapple and shook my head. "You do not understand my position, Sarah. I am never going back to work as a subordinate employee under anyone at that corporation ever again." Sarah looked stunned. I slid a single sheet of paper across the table. It was a contract I had typed up on my tablet while waiting for her private jet to land. "Here are my final terms," I told her, my voice completely steady. "First, Omnitrek will execute a complete buyout of the Winter Protocol intellectual property for a lump sum of exactly $15 million. Second, I am establishing my own independent consulting firm. My firm will become your exclusive technological partner, secured by an annual maintenance contract of $3 million. And finally, I require a permanent, irrevocable advisory seat on the board of directors. I will not have my life's work casually threatened by another arrogant manager looking to save a few pennies." Sarah stared at the paper, her eyes widening in sheer disbelief at the massive numbers. "Kendall, this is completely unprecedented. $15 million upfront? $3 million a year? The board will absolutely fight these demands." Before I could even reply, Sarah's secure corporate smartphone began vibrating aggressively against the glass table. She glanced at the screen, and the last remaining drop of color completely drained from her face. I could easily read the caller identification upside down. It was the chief operations officer of the largest national supermarket chain in the entire country, explicitly threatening to cancel their massive delivery contract permanently. She looked at the ringing phone, then looked at the cold, hard reality of my unyielding expression. She had absolutely zero leverage, and she knew it. The corporate giant was completely at the mercy of the engineer they had casually tried to throw away. Without saying another word, Sarah reached into her blazer, pulled out a heavy silver pen, and signed her name on the bottom line of my contract right there on the sunny pool deck. The exact second I saw her legal signature, I picked up my phone. I opened my proprietary command application, allowed the biometric scanner to quickly read my face, and pressed one single button. Thousands of miles away, back in the frozen, chaotic streets of Denver, 500 heavy-duty robots instantly went silent, cutting off the obnoxious holiday music. Their hazard lights switched back to a healthy operational green. The massive engines roared back to life, and the machines seamlessly resumed delivering their vital cargo right through the heavy blizzard. Sarah let out a massive breath of relief, looking physically completely drained. She stood up, gathered her things, and walked away to catch her long flight back to the freezing snow. I leaned back in my comfortable chair and took a long, refreshing sip of my tropical drink under the warm Hawaiian sun. I looked out at the beautiful, endless blue ocean. In America, people believe they can replace a corporate manager in one single day, but the people who actually build the foundation of the empire? If you decide to kick them out the door, you better make absolutely sure they do not take the blueprints to the entire building with them. Thank you all so much for listening to today's story. I would love to know where you are tuning in from, so please let me know your city or country in the comments below. If you found today's story entertaining, please remember that YouTube has completely disabled our monetization, meaning we absolutely cannot upload new videos here for the foreseeable future. We are transitioning our operations to Patreon, so please help us keep the channel alive by joining our Patreon community. There, you can listen to our absolute best exclusive, true stories that are too detailed and dramatic to make public on YouTube. You can scan the Patreon QR code currently on your screen, or simply click the link provided in the video description and the pinned comment. Thank you again for your incredible support.